I went to a church men's campout a few years back. Everyone was sitting around the fire cooking breakfast. Joe, an old-time rancher, starts cooking some homemade sausage. A few minutes go by, then someone asks, "Hey Joe, what kind of sausage is that? It smells good." To which Joe replies, "Chocolate sausage." This gets everyone's attention. When the sausage finished cooking, Joe offers a piece to anyone who wanted to try it. A few of the guys take a cut and eat it, then get confused looks on their faces. The same guy asks Joe again, "This doesn't taste any different than normal sausage. Chocolate?" Still waking up, Joe clears his throat and says, "The horse was named Chocolate." 1. This is the story of a 5-year-old son, who, after watching a story of an emperor on TV, said to his mother, "Mom, I also want 7 wives. One will cook for me, one will read for me, one will go for a walk with me, one will sing for me, one can bath me. Mom smiled and said, "Then nighttime I don't have to accompany you to sleep." After some thought, son said, "Not possible. I still want to sleep with you, Mummy." Mom's eyes fill up with tears of happiness. "My sweet son. Then who will sleep with your 7 wives? Let them sleep with Daddy." Dad's eyes fill up with tears of happiness. "My sweet son." 2. On their way home from a night out, 2 women suddenly needed to use the bathroom. With no other options, they decided to stop at a graveyard. Realizing they had nothing to wipe with, the first woman shrugged, took off her panties, and used them. The second woman, looking around, grabbed a wreath from a nearby grave and used that. The next morning, one of their husbands called the other and said, "That's it, no more girls' nights out. My wife came home with no pants." The other husband sighed. "That's nothing. Mine came home with a card stuck in her crack that said, 'From all of us at the fire station, we will never forget you.'" 3. The doctor had a simple policy, a $50 fee for any treatment, regardless of the ailment. However, if he failed to find a cure, he would compensate the patient with $500. One day, a man visited the doctor and said, "Doctor, I think my sense of taste is deteriorating." The doctor handed him a jar. "Take a spoonful of this." The man took a taste, immediately spat it out, and exclaimed, "This is shaving foam. Why would you give this to a patient?" The doctor smiled. "Well, your sense of taste seems just fine. That'll be $50. 2 weeks later, the same man returned. "Doctor, I think I'm developing Alzheimer's." The doctor handed him another jar. "Take a spoonful of this." The man frowned. "Wait a second, this is shaving foam again." The doctor nodded. So your memory is perfectly intact. That'll be $50. A couple of months later, the man returned once more, looking determined. "Doctor, I've lost my eyesight. Please help me." The doctor sighed. "I'm afraid I don't have a cure for that. Here's $500. The man grinned, finally having outsmarted the doctor, until he glanced at the money and blurted out, "Wait, this is only $5. The doctor shook his head. "Well, it seems your eyesight is just fine. That'll be $50. Jake was lugging 2 massive suitcases through a bustling bus station when a stranger approached him. "Got the time?" the stranger asked. With a weary sigh, Jake set down his bags, glanced at his wrist, and replied, "It's 5:45. The stranger's eyes widened. "Wow, that's some impressive watch you have there." Jake brightened up a bit and said, "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet." He tapped a button, and suddenly the display showed the time in every time zone around the world. Another button, and a voice announced, "The time is 6:11. Jake explained, "It even uses different regional accents for each city." "And the display? Unbelievably sharp, right? The voice quality is incredible too." The stranger was awestruck. "But wait, there's more," Jake said with a grin, tapping another button. A miniature map of New York City appeared, complete with a flashing dot marking their location via satellite. "See? Real-time location tracking. I have to buy this watch," the stranger exclaimed. Jake shook his head. Oh, it's not for sale, still working out some bugs. But check this out. He proceeded to show off the watch's FM radio, a sonar device measuring up to 125 meters, a pager with a thermal printout, and even a voice recorder with enough space to store 300 full-length audiobooks. The stranger was sold. I don't care, I need this watch. I'll pay you $1,000. No, you don't understand, Jake replied, shaking his head. $5,000, the stranger insisted. Jake hesitated. Fine, $15,000. The stranger whipped out his checkbook and started writing, his hand shaking with excitement. Jake thought it over. He had only invested about $8,500 into the watch, and with $15,000, he could build another one and maybe even start mass production. The stranger thrust the check into his hand, sealing the deal. All right, it's yours, Jake said, handing over the watch. The stranger practically skipped away in excitement, but Jake called after him. Hey, don't forget your batteries. He pointed to the two massive suitcases. They power the watch. 5. My wife and I were in bed watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I turned to her and said, Do you want to have some fun? No, she replied. I grinned and asked, Is that your final answer? She didn't even look at me this time, just said, Yes. Well then, I'll phone a friend. And that's when the fight began. I took my wife to a restaurant and for some reason, the waiter took my order first. I'll have the rump steak rare, please. He raised an eyebrow and said, Aren't you worried about mad cow disease? I replied, Nah, she can order for herself. And that's when the fight began. At her high school reunion, my wife kept staring at a drunken man sitting alone at a table. I asked, Do you know him? Yes, she sighed. He's my ex. After we broke up, he turned to drinking, and I hear he hasn't sobered up since. I said, Wow, who would have thought someone could celebrate that long? And that's when the fight started. When our lawnmower broke, my wife kept hinting I should get it fixed. But I always had something more pressing, like working on the shed, fixing the boat, or brewing beer. Finally, she found a clever way to get me to pay attention. I came home one day to find her sitting in the tall grass, cutting it with tiny sewing scissors. I stood there watching her for a minute, then went inside. A minute later, I came back out with a toothbrush and said, When you finish with the grass, you might as well clean the driveway. The doctors say I'll walk again, but I'll always have a limp. My wife sat down next to me as I was flipping channels. She asked, What's on TV? I said, Dust. And that's when the fight started. On a Saturday morning, I got up early, packed my lunch, and quietly hooked the boat to the van. I drove out into a storm, but when I checked the weather on the radio, I realized it was going to be bad all day. I backed the van into the garage, undressed quietly, and slipped back into bed. I cuddled up to my wife and whispered, The weather is awful outside. She groggily replied, And can you believe my idiot husband is out fishing in that? And that's when the fight started. For our anniversary, my wife hinted at wanting something shiny that could go from 0 to 150 in 3 seconds. So, I bought her a bathroom scale. And that's when the fight started. After retiring, I went to the Social Security office to apply for benefits. The lady asked for my driver's license, but I realized I left my wallet at home. I apologized and said I'd have to come back. She said, Unbutton your shirt. I revealed my silver chest hair, and she nodded. That'll do, she said, and processed my application. When I got home, I told my wife the story, and she said, You should have dropped your pants. You might have qualified for disability too. And that's when the fight started. My wife stood in front of the mirror, looking upset. I feel awful. I'm old, fat, and ugly. I really need a compliment, she said. I looked at her and replied, Your eyesight is almost perfect. And that's when the fight started. I rear-ended a car this morning, and it turned into a really bad day. The driver got out, and he was a dwarf. He looked up at me and said, I am not happy. I answered, well, which one are you then? And that's when the fight started. One year, I bought my mother-in-law a cemetery plot for Christmas. The next year, I didn't get her anything. When she asked why, I said, well, you still haven't used the gift I got you last year. And that's when the fight started. A few years ago, when I retired, Carol had to take on a full-time job in addition to her part-time job. The extra income and health benefits were necessary, and I, being the supportive husband I am, fully encouraged her. Shortly after she started working, I began to notice she was slowing down. By the time I got home from a long, exhausting day at the golf club, she would come in from work looking a bit worn out. Even though she knows how hungry I am, she insists on resting for half an hour before starting dinner. But do I yell? Of course not. I patiently tell her to take her time, just as long as she wakes me up when dinner is ready. Since I usually have lunch at the grill at the club, eating out in the evening isn't an option. I expect a good, home-cooked meal, and I let her know that. Back in the day, she would do the dishes right after dinner, but now, they sometimes sit there for hours. I help out by gently reminding her multiple times that dishes don't clean themselves. I can tell she appreciates the motivation. Another sign of aging is complaining. Carol has mentioned how hard it is to find time to pay the bills during her lunch break. But fellas, we take them for better or worse, right? So, I offer solutions. I suggest spreading the bill payments over 2 or 3 days. No need to rush. And, as a bonus, I remind her that skipping lunch every now and then might help with her figure. Tact is one of my gifts. She also seems to need more breaks when doing simple tasks. Just the other day, she had to rest halfway through mowing the lawn. I didn't make a fuss. I told her to treat herself to a big, refreshing glass of freshly squeezed orange juice, and while she's at it, she might as well make one for me too. I know I probably sound like a saint with all this patience and encouragement. And I won't lie, most men would struggle to be as understanding as I am. Women can get frustrating as they age, but if even one man reading this learns to be more patient with his wife, I'll consider this article a success. After all, we're put on this earth to help each other. Rob passed away suddenly after publishing this letter. The coroner's report confirmed the cause of death as a perforated rectum. Police found him with a Callaway extra-long 50-inch Big Bertha Driver 2 golf club lodged in an unfortunate location, with only 5 inches of grip showing. A sledgehammer was found nearby. Carol was arrested and charged with his murder. The all-woman jury deliberated for only 9 minutes before delivering a not guilty verdict, accepting her defense that Rob, somehow, accidentally sat down on his golf club. 7. A doctor was having an affair with his nurse. Shortly afterward, she told him she was pregnant. Not wanting his wife to know, he gave the nurse a sum of money and asked her to go to Italy and have the baby there. "But how will I let you know the baby is born?" she asked. He replied, "Just send me a postcard and write spaghetti on the back. I'll take care of expenses." Not knowing what else to do, the nurse took the money and flew to Italy. 6 months went by and then one day the doctor's wife called him at the office and explained, "Dear, you received a very strange postcard in the mail today from Europe, and I don't understand what it means." The doctor said, "Just wait until I get home, and I will explain it to you." Later that evening, the doctor came home, read the postcard, and fell to the floor with a heart attack. Paramedics rushed him to the ER. The lead medic stayed back to comfort the wife. He asked what trauma had precipitated the cardiac arrest. So the wife picked up the card and read, "Spaghetti, spaghetti, 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 2 with sausage and meatballs, 2 without." Once upon a time there was a little girl, and one day her mommy decided it was time for her to learn how to cook sausages. So she explains, slowly and patiently. "You cut off the ends of the sausages, put a non-stick pan over a medium heat, and then add the sausages. Keep cooking, moving them around in the pan and turning them over regularly so they all cook evenly." The little girl listens, pays attention, and watches closely as her mommy shows her how it's done. But this little girl is clever, and she asks questions. Mommy, why do you cut off the ends of the sausages? The mother is slightly thrown off guard as she doesn't know, and just tries to avoid the subject. That's just how it's done, honey. Weeks go by and one day the time has come to eat sausages again and the ritual repeats itself. The mommy explains, the little girl watches and learns, and after some careful consideration she asks the exact same question. But mommy, you still didn't tell me why you cut off the ends of the sausages? At this point the mother can't brush off the little girl anymore, and tells her she just doesn't know but they will ask the little girl's grandmother. So they drive up to the grandmother's house, they make conversation, and at some point the little girl just has to ask, Grandma, why do you cut off the ends of the sausages? Just like the mother, the grandmother simply does not know. She tries to tell the little girl she should just do as she is told, but this little girl is persistent. One thing leads to another and finally they all agree they will ask the little girl's great-grandmother, who is still alive. So they drive up to the retirement home. Now, you should know the great-grandmother is old, getting deaf, and she shouts, hence the all caps. Once again they try to make conversation, which is not easy because the great-grandmother is hard of hearing. But you guessed it, the moment finally comes, and the little girl asks, Great-grandmother, I just have to ask, why do you cut off the ends of the sausages? What? Speak up, girl, I can't hear you. Say that again? The great-grandmother replies. The child raises her voice, and asks again, Why do you cut off the ends of the sausages? And the great-grandmother goes, WTF? Are you guys still using that small frying pan?
And before you go, here's the deal. I tell jokes on YouTube, but this is no joke. For every 1,000 subscribers and likes on this video, I will find 50+ homeless people and donate $100 each to them. Hit subscribe and let's spread laughs and kindness.